contractor was certain there was nothing behind the wall. Then his drill hit steel. Pope Leo XIV was standing only 20 feet away when the sound changed. The contractor froze. He slowly pulled the drill back and looked toward the Pope. "Holy Father, you should probably see this." A section of plaster was removed. Behind it was brick, but the brickwork was newer than the rest of the building. The contractor made the opening larger. Metal appeared behind it. Bishop Daniel Mercer stepped closer. "There's no room here on the plans." The contractor nodded. "That's what I thought." Nobody knew it yet, but they had just found a room that had been hidden for nearly 40 years. St. Anne family home outside Chicago had been empty for more than 30 years. Its chapel windows were boarded. Part of the roof had collapsed, and old wallpaper hung from the second-floor corridor. The building was now being renovated into affordable apartments for older adults, and Pope Leo had come to bless the project. Instead, the contractor had discovered a secret. He pushed a small camera through the opening. Everyone watched the monitor. Shelves appeared, then boxes, more shelves. Hundreds of boxes, and along the floor were old canvas mail sacks. Bishop Mercer whispered, "Records." Before anyone could say anything else, an elderly woman sitting near the doorway spoke. "The bags are mail." Everyone turned. Her name was Martha Keene. She was 88 years old, had worked at St. Anne from 1965 until 1982, and 3 weeks earlier she had written directly to Pope Leo. Her letter contained one sentence he could not forget. "Before anyone celebrates what St. Anne is becoming, someone should open the room where we hid what St. Anne was." Pope Leo walked toward her. "You knew about this," Martha nodded. "Since 1989. Bishop Mercer frowned. "You stopped working here in 1982. Martha looked toward the wall. "I still knew people." Pope asked, "Who sealed it?" Martha hesitated. "Father Bernard Shaw." The name was familiar. Shaw had directed St. Anne's family services for decades. He had died in 2001. Martha continued, "Sister Agnes was here, 2 men from the office. I wasn't supposed to be there." Pope Leo looked at her. "But you were," Martha nodded. "Why would they seal a room?" She rubbed her thumb across the handle of her cane. "They said the files inside had become dangerous." Pope asked, "Dangerous to whom?" Martha didn't answer. The contractor moved the camera again. Boxes filled almost every shelf. Martha looked at the screen and whispered, "Those are the letters." Pope Leo turned toward her. "What letters?" Martha swallowed. "The ones we told people never came." The hallway became completely silent. St. Anne had once been a maternity and family placement home. Young, pregnant women stayed there. Some kept their children. Others placed infants for adoption. For decades, many of those adoptions had been closed. Pope Leo understood what she was suggesting. "Letters from birth mothers," Martha nodded. "To their children, yes, and from children, some." "How many?" Martha looked at the wall. "I don't know," Pope asked. "Hundreds." Her eyes filled with tears. "Probably thousands." The room was opened under the supervision of an independent archivist and legal specialists. Nobody rushed inside. Pope Leo entered first with the archivist. 3 walls were covered with shelves. Boxes were marked by year: 1964, 1965, 1966, 1967. Along the floor were old mail sacks. The archivist opened one. Hundreds of envelopes appeared. Some were unopened. Some had been returned. Others had notes clipped to them. Pope Leo picked up one envelope. It was dated April 3, 1974. On the front were the words, "For baby girl Markham." Martha saw it and her expression changed immediately. Pope noticed. "Who is she?" Martha answered quietly, "Helen's baby." Pope looked at her. "Helen who?" "Helen Markham." "Is Helen alive?" "Yes." "How old?" 86. Pope looked at the envelope again. "Does she know these letters are here?" Martha shook her head. "No." "What did you tell her?" Martha stared at the floor. That her daughter never answered. Pope felt something tighten in his chest. 2 women had spent most of their lives believing the other had chosen silence. Helen Markham believed her daughter had never wanted her. Her daughter had been told that her birth mother did not want contact. And somewhere inside this hidden room were the letters that could prove both women had been lied to. Pope Leo asked for Helen's number. Martha gave it to him. When Helen answered, she immediately said, "Which scam is this?" Pope replied, "No scam, I'm calling about St. Anne." There was silence. Then Helen's voice changed. "What about it?" Pope said. "Martha Keene is here." Helen immediately asked, "Is she there?" "Yes." "Put her on." Martha took the phone. Helen's voice came through the speaker. "You told him," Martha said. "Yes." Helen asked. Why now? Martha looked toward the hidden room. They opened the wall. There was a long silence. Then Helen said, You told me the letters were destroyed. Martha closed her eyes. I know, Helen asked. Were mine there? Martha answered, Yes. All of them? I don't know yet. Helen's breathing became uneven. Then she asked the question that changed everything. Did Claire write? Martha froze. Pope Leo noticed. Who is Claire? He asked after the call ended. Martha answered, Helen's daughter. The search began immediately. The records showed that Helen's baby had been adopted by David and Susan Whitmore. Her new name was Claire Ann Whitmore. Claire was now 57 years old. She lived in Wisconsin, was married, and had 2 adult sons. Her file contained 27 pieces of mail from Helen, birthday cards, Christmas letters, a letter after Helen married, another after she had another child. Helen had kept writing for decades. Claire's file contained letters, too. The first contact request came in 1986, shortly after she turned 18. She had asked one simple question. Is my birth mother alive? St. Anne replied, Birth mother has not consented to contact. But that answer was not true. The archivist found a document from 1984. Helen had signed a consent allowing contact. Then they found Claire's second letter. She had written again at 21, again at 29. Then after her first son was born, one letter contained a photograph. On the back, Claire had written, If she does not want to meet me, please tell her I turned out all right. Helen never received that letter. Claire never received Helen's letters. Both women had been reaching toward the same person for decades, and St. Anne had stood between them. Pope Leo asked Martha, who changed Claire's contact status. Martha answered, Father Shaw. Why? Family stability. Bishop Mercer looked at the documents. Were the adoptive parents allowed to block contact after Claire became an adult? The archivist shook his head. Not automatically. Then another document appeared. It was a letter from Claire's adoptive mother, Susan Whitmore, written in 1986. Susan had written to Father Shaw because Claire intended to search for her birth mother. She admitted she was frightened. But then she wrote something that changed the entire story. Being frightened does not give me the right to decide for her. If Helen Markham wants contact, please do not tell her I object. Please tell her Claire has been loved. Martha stared at the letter. No, she whispered. Pope Leo asked, What did Father Shaw tell you? Martha's eyes filled with tears. He told us the Whitmores wanted permanent closure. Did you see anything supporting that? No. Then what did you do? Martha looked down. I typed his memo. She had trusted Father Shaw. He had helped her when she was young, had given her work, helped her through difficult years, and became someone she believed she owed her loyalty to. But that loyalty had turned into silence. Then the archivists found something nobody expected. A cassette tape with Father Shaw's initials. They played it in room 14. His voice was old and tired. He explained that some letters had genuinely been restricted because people had requested privacy. But he admitted that over time, temporary holds became permanent. Staff delayed decisions because they were afraid of making the wrong choice. Eventually, they stopped making choices at all. Then Shaw said something Martha had never heard before. I told myself I was protecting families because the alternative was admitting I had become afraid of them. The room remained silent. Then he admitted that he had misrepresented some adoptive parents' objections. He had believed that reunions could sometimes hurt families, and he had used that possibility to justify controlling the decisions. Finally, his voice became almost a whisper. I told staff the letters were destroyed. He paused. They are not. I could not destroy them. But I could not face opening them either. Another pause. So I hid the decision inside a wall and left it for somebody braver. Martha began crying. He lied to us. Pope Leo looked at her. Yes, Martha whispered. I spent 37 years angry at myself for helping him. Pope didn't immediately answer. Finally, he said, You probably should be. Martha looked at him. That isn't comforting. Pope replied, I wasn't trying to be. For the first time that morning, Martha smiled. Claire was contacted through an independent intermediary. At first, she refused to believe the story. Then she agreed to a video call. Pope Leo appeared on her screen. Did you find my mother? She asked. Yes. Alive? Yes. Claire put both hands over her mouth. Did she ever ask about me? Yes. How often? Pope hesitated. A lot. Claire looked away. I was told she refused contact. Pope nodded. I know. Claire became angry. That's a terrible answer. Pope said, It is. After a long silence, Claire asked, "Can I speak to her?" Pope replied, "If both of you want to." Claire didn't hesitate. "I do." The first call lasted only seconds before anyone spoke. Helen was in Michigan. Claire was in Wisconsin. A counselor joined them. Pope Leo stayed out of frame because Helen had asked him to remain nearby. The screen connected. Helen covered her mouth. Claire froze. 10 seconds passed, then 11. Helen finally said, "You look like my mother." Claire started crying and then laughed. "My husband says I look like an exhausted librarian." Helen smiled through her tears. "That too." The awkwardness helped. Claire asked, "Did you write every year?" Helen answered, "Almost." Claire said, "I thought you didn't want me." Helen shook her head. "I never said that." Claire whispered, "I know that now." And Claire asked the question she had carried for 57 years. "Why did you give me away?" Helen closed her eyes. "I was 18, I had no money, my family couldn't help me, I thought I was choosing parents who could give you things I couldn't." Claire asked, "Were they good?" Helen immediately answered, "Yes." Claire nodded. "They were." Helen started crying. "Thank God." Claire's eyes filled with tears too. Then she said, "I'm still angry." Helen answered, "I know." Claire said, "I lost 58 years." Helen looked at her daughter and whispered, "So did I." Neither woman apologized for saying it. They simply allowed the truth to exist. 3 days later, Claire drove to Michigan. The first hug was shorter than both had imagined. They separated, looked at each other, and then hugged again. At Helen's kitchen table, Claire handed her a sealed envelope. It was from Susan, Claire's adoptive mother. Helen opened it. Susan admitted she had been afraid that Claire might prefer her birth mother. She admitted she had feared biology would become more important than the 18 years she had spent raising Claire. But then she wrote, "Claire has been loved every day she has been ours." Helen stopped reading. Claire finished the letter. The final sentence said, "I hope St. Anne is brave enough to let us decide." Helen stared at the page. "They weren't," she whispered. Claire took her hand. "But eventually we were." The story could have ended there, but room 14 had one more surprise. During the final stage of renovation, workers removed an old cabinet and found a small metal box behind it. Inside were old keys, photographs, Father Shaw's notebook, and another letter. Martha opened the folder and suddenly stopped breathing. Her own name was written on the first page. It was about her brother, Thomas. Martha had lost contact with him decades earlier. In 1981, she had asked Father Shaw to help locate him. He told her they had tried and failed. But the folder contained a letter from Thomas dated 1984. He had found St. Anne himself. He knew Martha worked there. He had written, "I don't know whether you're angry with me. I should have looked for you sooner. If you want me, I am here." Under the words was his telephone number. Martha stared at the page. Pope Leo asked, "Do you want to wait?" She shook her head. "No." Then she whispered, "He died in 2017. For decades, Martha had believed her brother had forgotten her. He hadn't. He had searched for her. He had written to her. And his letter had been sitting behind the same wall she had been afraid to open. Martha began laughing and crying at the same time. "I don't even know what that is." Pope Leo sat beside her. "Neither do I." The review of St. Anne continued for months. The truth was more complicated than anyone expected. Some letters had been improperly held. Others had been correctly restricted. Some people had genuinely requested privacy. Some people wanted contact now. Others did not. So Pope Leo refused to release the archive publicly. Every case would be reviewed individually. Consent, current law, safety, and the wishes of living people had to come first. Because fixing an old injustice by creating a new one would not be justice. A year later, St. Anne reopened. 48 affordable apartments for seniors occupied most of the building. The old chapel remained. Room 14 remained too, but it was empty. No names were displayed. No private letters were placed behind glass. Only a section of the false wall remained exposed, along with an old empty mail sack. Helen and Claire attended the opening together. They had spent a year learning how to be related. It wasn't perfect. Claire still called Susan Mom, and Helen never asked her to stop. One of Claire's sons had started calling Helen Grandma Helen. Helen loved it, then immediately told him to stand up straight. Martha arrived in a wheelchair. Her health had worsened, but she had met the daughters of her brother Thomas. They brought photographs. One showed Thomas as an old man. Martha stared at it and whispered, "He got old." His daughter laughed. "That tends to happen." Martha smiled and touched the photograph. Then she looked toward room 14. If that contractor hadn't hit that wall, Pope Leo finished the sentence for her. I know, Martha shook her head. That's too much to leave to an accident. Pope Leo looked toward the empty room. Maybe that's why someone had to finally look. Later, Pope Leo stood alone inside room 14. The shelves were gone. The boxes were gone. The mail sacks were gone. The steel door had been removed. There was almost nothing left to see. Outside, Helen and Claire were arguing about where to eat lunch. Helen wanted somewhere inexpensive. Claire wanted Italian. Neither noticed the Pope watching them. For decades, both women had believed silence was an answer. It never was. That was what St. Anne had really hidden. Not just letters, not just records. It had hidden the chance for people to answer for themselves. A mother had been waiting for a daughter. A daughter had been waiting for a mother. A brother had been waiting for a sister. And all those years, the letters were sitting behind a wall. Sometimes the biggest secret isn't what is hidden behind a wall. Sometimes it's the truth that someone was never allowed to hear. And when room 14 was finally opened, they didn't find stolen treasure. They didn't find a monster. They found something much more painful. They found answers. And for some people, those answers came decades too late. But they came. Because a wall only works as long as everyone agrees not to look behind it.